Is the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship ever coming back? Well, as far as we're concerned, why bother? Join us now as how Wrestlelamia looks at how the WWE Women's Tag Team division was embarrassingly bad. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos, and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists. Also check out Wrestlelamia.co.uk and our non-wrestling channel, Incredible. The Women's Tag Team Championship is a classic example of the WWE starting off something strong only for it to virtually abandon the idea. Fans have seen this far too often with wrestlers, factions, for example Retribution, and even concepts like Raw Underground, a concept that we admit was happy to see disappear, that it seems like booking 101. Everyone knows Mr. McMahon can't stay focused on more than one thing, which explains Roman Reigns' push, and the Women's Tag Team division had proved no different. Tag team wrestling certainly hasn't been the WWE's strong suit for many years. Rumor has it that Vince McMahon is not a fan of tag team wrestling, and it's easy to believe the behind-the-scenes scuttlebutt is true based on how the WWE breaks up promising tag teams or fails to push them entirely. In terms of failing to push tag teams properly, that's a problem that faces singles and tag team stars. But what about WWE's penchant for splitting teams? Certainly there are times when it makes sense to break up a tag team. One or both members of the team may be ready to break out into a singles career, or the team may have outlasted its usefulness. Alas, that hasn't been the case with many of the tag teams that have been ended prematurely. And not surprisingly, the women's division is no different, particularly when it comes to splitting up teams. The WWE routinely splits up its tag teams, often with no storyline purpose. For example, the 2021 WWE Draft led to the end of the promising Tegan Nox-Shotzi Blackheart tag team and the former tag team champions Natalya and Tamina. The WWE's well-documented failure at following things up was seen when they split the Iconics of Billie Kay and Peyton Royce up because the WWE supposedly wanted to push Peyton as a single star, but her push was short-lived and the Iconics were future endeavored in April of 2021. Notwithstanding the women's tag team division's deterioration, the tag team championship did get off to a great start, as we're about to see. The women's tag team championship got off to a great start when the WWE booked a 6-team women's elimination chamber match to determine the inaugural tag team champions. The bout not only featured some exciting action, it showed the number of strong teams in the WWE and teams that were built on the idea of tag team specialists. In fact, 3 of the teams that competed in the chamber had to qualify, which meant there were 9 active or semi-active female tag teams in the WWE at the time. Compare that to today, where the only active team is Nikki Cross and Doudrop. The Iconics, Carmella and Naomi, the Riot Squad, Tamina and Nia Jax, the Boss and Hug Connection, and Fire and Desire worked a 33-minute match that showed the WWE's women had a good quantity of teams who could put quality over quantity. The Boss and Hug Connection became fighting champions, defending the belts at Fastlane, followed by their fantastic Fatal 4-Way tag match at WrestleMania 35. There, the Iconics captured the title, which marked the title's last day as something special. The Iconics had shown their worth as a tag team long before they'd captured the women's tag titles, but the WWE began a terrible trend of infrequent title defenses, a sign that the promotion was already losing interest in the belts. Interestingly, several top teams have held the belts, including the Boss and Hug Connection, the Kabuki Warriors, and the team of Charlotte Flair and Asuka. The tag team titles haven't suffered due to a lack of quality wrestlers, but due to a lack of quality promoting. The worst development in the tag titles was the WWE's shift from tag team division as a worthwhile division in its own right to a platform for the women's world champions on Raw and or SmackDown. For example, the Kabuki Warriors title run led to a side feud between Asuka and then Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch. Likewise, the women's tag titles became a prop for an overpush program featuring Bayley and Sasha Banks in 2020 when the two heels held both tag titles and the SmackDown and Raw Women's Championships respectively. The WWE's handling of its women's tag team division hasn't been above average since WrestleMania 35, but is there any merit to having a tag team division at all? Although tag teams are treated largely like a sideshow in the WWE, they can still serve a valuable purpose, especially in the women's division that often focuses on the same main event stars in the Women's World Championship picture. Although that may be changing with the elevation of Bianca Belair to the main event and Liv Morgan's potential stay there. For the WWE, tag teams can give wrestlers a direction when it's obvious the WWE isn't behind them as single stars. Whether you agree with the WWE's decision to not push Shayna Baszler as a single star on the main roster, she's been a featured player in the tag team division, at least keeping her on TV and away from being future endeavored, while a chance remains for her to bounce back into singles division. though this may not happen at all. Now, although the WWE has shown no ability to do anything with its tag teams, it has shown the ability to throw tag teams together at the proverbial drop of a hat. Just look back at Wrestlemania 37, where the WWE held its tag team turmoil match, where 4 teams battled on night 1 to get a shot at women's tag team champions Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler on night 2. The reformed Riot Squad battled Lana and Naomi, Billie Kay and Carmella, and Dana Brooke and Mandy Rose. Naturally, it's difficult to take tag teams seriously when they're hastily thrown together and just hastily split up. Regardless of the slapdash storytelling, the WWE Universe has repeatedly shown a willingness to get behind a tag team division. As we've seen, the WWE hasn't, and the question remains, are the tag team titles even worth keeping at all? Now, despite the WWE elevating Bianca Belair to the main event, a spot she's thrived in, and finally giving Liv Morgan a run with the SmackDown Women's Championship, a move which could last or become Nikki Ash 2.0, there are many female stars who don't appear to have main event pushes in the near future. These include established stars like Dana Brooke, Nikki Ash, Shayna Baszler, Tamina and Natalya, as well as younger talents such as Shotzi, Aaliyah, Raquel Rodriguez, Doudrop and Xia Li. Add in some of the talent on NXT, and WWE has a capacity to build an active tag team division with 4 or 6 regular teams, or 1 or 2 all-star teams comprised of main eventers who are currently out of the singles picture, either in a feud or a championship chase program. For example, Alexa and Asuka recently teamed up, and both ladies' past success in the tag division suggests they'd be effective together. The ideal approach for a women's tag team championship would be to have the titles defended on Raw, SmackDown and NXT. If the tag team championship was pushed properly, it could build interest in fans wanting to see the belts defended on all 3 shows, a concept it's used before. Now, we're not suggesting the women's tag team titles will become destination television, but there may be a way to get fans to tune in to, say, NXT and introduce them to NXT's female stars and even create an inter-brand rivalry. Nonetheless, the WWE has shown no sign that they had the ability or desire to book a women's tag team championship. This shouldn't surprise anyone, as the WWE has taken a half-hearted approach to its secondary titles to the US Championship and Intercontinental Championship. Some fans would go further and say the Undisputed Championship has become another poorly promoted title. Ironically, the WWE's Women's World Championships seem to be the only titles that are regularly promoted and treated as something special, regardless of whether you agree with the choice of wrestlers competing at this level. The Women's Tag Team Championship will remain an afterthought as long as Vince McMahon is in charge. If the existence of a women's tag titles gives wrestlers a chance to make it to television and keep them off the ever-present WWE chopping block, well then keep it. The WWE has shown it can create women's tag teams with no planning, and that its women are generally talented enough to form entertaining teams with just about any partner. They could quickly build up its women's tag team division and hold a 4 or even 8 team tournament to crown new champions. But what then? The Women's Tag Team Championship enjoyed a short-lived moment of glory, however it hasn't been special in a long time, even if you look back at it with the rose-coloured glasses of nostalgia. Fans should not look at the contemporary Tag Team Championship as anything special, and it's unlikely to change if the titles are ever brought back. But there you have it, folks. What's your stance on this? Let us know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.